computer button. Okay, take it away.
All right, I think some of you might have seen aspects of this already, but we're talking about virtual practice and efficiencies and automations available to be built into Cerbo, which has made my practice very lean and efficient. I do have a brick and mortar that is currently pretty much closed, but I was 85% virtual before we even started. And I mean, you know, started with the COVID issues. And we've been running this way for about 4-ish years or so. And yeah, so I'm kind of filling you in about our experience and also, you know, what the actual efficiencies and integrations are that have made this practice model possible. So I guess next slide.
Yeah.
Just a really brief overview. I've been in practice for 8 years and started out just brick and mortar, and then that evolved over time. But the monumental event that made it realize that, you know, a virtual model was actually quite possible and successful was an injury I had that actually kept me housebound and sort of bedbound for a number of months. And it was at that time too that we realized, you know, people actually really loved the convenience of a virtual model. It made things very accessible. Didn't have to drive anywhere, as many of you might be experiencing right now. And along the way, there have been a whole bunch of layers of development and other things that we've taken on over time that we're going to share today. So the original idea for this came actually from James Maskell, who many of you might know. It was around Christmas of 2015. He had this idea of a practice in a box, or rather a practice like in a computer, where you could take a laptop out of a box, open the laptop, and everything to run a virtual practice was on that system, so that you could work from anywhere in the world. So you could travel, which is something that we love to do and do often, and see patients wherever you were. To be able to do that meant taking a lot of the functions that might otherwise have been in a brick and mortar, like keeping test kits and checking people out, meant building that into the system that we have now. So that's how it all started.
All right.
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay, what kind of
yeah.
How my version of this started is, it started because my partner is a provider, and providers give way too much of your time, energy, and love to your patients that it takes time away from your family. So I wanted to find a way that I could steal some time back. And so it's all done very selfishly. Lovely love, but done very selfishly. I wanted more of my partner. I wanted to be able to do things. We'd love to travel. And with the conceptual and the ideas, if we could implement and make this work, it would allow us to travel and work very freely, and it has been, and it's been a beautiful blessing. Started out with simple website designs, then it came into leveraging Cerbo and how to make it kind of bend in a certain way that it wasn't supposed to, and then it turned into just building true integrations in technology.
It may actually have like supposed to, because it was built to be customized, but the level of customization that ended up being created over time, since we were fairly early adopters in 2014, is what's, you know, currently.
What I mean by that, it definitely, we aren't doing anything they're not supposed to, but using different pieces and parts of the system to do things a little differently than what anyone else is doing to allow other little things. And then throughout that, we created Nutriment RX, the supplement integration company, which is now turned into a white label store for providers that is integrated with MDHQ. And then FxMedSupport came on board, which is the technology component, the application that sits on MDHQ that allows us to connect to all different applications and bring them into MDHQ.
Okay. So our virtual practice model is built on 6 principles. And those 6 principles are, first of all, that if it doesn't take your credentials, that you should not be the one doing that task. I know in the early days when people start out, it's common for you to be the one that's ordering the lab and filling out the forms and checking in lab results and transcribing stuff. And then as practices evolve and you get more busy, what I've seen oftentimes, and this was true for me too, it's really hard to transition to being able to delegate and have the right processes and people in place to do that for you. And so, you know, one of the things that this is built upon is that if it doesn't require you as a clinician, someone else should be doing it, or something else should be doing it. In this case, you know, that whether it's the automations where a computer's doing it, or our team. So that brings me to the second one, which is the outsourcing. My entire team is virtual, and because they're virtual and they set their own pace and their own hours and all these various things, they are all contract employees. They're not W-2 employees, which the one time in my practice history I had an actual like in-person employee was quite a learning lesson. And this team has been with us for 3.5, 4 years. Yeah, and they're amazing. And I'll talk more about who they are in a moment, but basically outsourcing all the functions that don't require you is how we've been functioning. And then the third one is that as we were building this, it initially was actually being built to offer as a kind of a public service company. And in that process of building the practice in a box model, we created what are called working procedures. And working procedures are documents and or video that shows you step by step how to do something in your practice or on your platform that has a lot of kind of later uses. For example, if you have someone that needs to take on the task of another role or person, somebody's out on maternity leave, if someone's out sick, if you need to bring on new team members because you're growing. And so the working procedures ends up being this really great reference manual that allows your team to learn how to do things in your practice without there having to be just constant one-on-one teaching. It's already documented.
And even more important, when you have that random employee or contracted worker call in sick and you just need somebody else on the team to step up and take their tasks for the day, there's no instruction. It's, that this person does this, you quickly go to the WP, you read it, or you watch the video on how to do that task, and you now have all the knowledge. You don't have to go to them. You don't have to go to another teammate and ask how to do it. It's a training manual. It's also super high level for a business owner and provider. It allows you to actually know what your staff is doing. The people you pay money to, what they do in every task.
Yeah. And then the fourth is that anything that can be automated to be done by a computer system rather than a person is another key principle, because that makes for high efficiency and lower overhead. And then fifth is that being able to integrate outside applications like Zoom or Google Docs or MailChimp or any of those features allows for expanded service. Or in this case too, we have an app that patients can download that is like specific to the practice, and that allows them to use Cerbo directly from their phone rather than like having to sign into a browser, which has been awesome. And then the sixth is it's one of our principles, but depends on your personality, but being able to leverage this practice model to have a lifestyle that you want, that doesn't like bind you to a brick and mortar. If you want to take the family somewhere for a month in the summer and live somewhere else, if you want to be able to still work but tend to other things, like
it allows you to look at all scenarios and situations and ensure that your goal isn't always to maximize the dollar. It can be maximize different things to allow everybody that's involved to win, but you also get to win in a way that isn't just a dollar. It could be a lifestyle, it could be trips, it could be a lot of other flexibility. So a lot of other things, because usually per practices, they strive to continue to look at the dollar bottom line. When you look at how to leverage different things show into light that can really benefit your practice in different ways. So what we'll go over in the presentation is the website and the patient onboarding, the working procedures, and we call them WPs, the virtual team and the different levels of the virtual team, EMR, and in this case, MDHQ, and then we'll quickly touch on the platform applications and integrations.
So because I'm not primarily a brick and mortar, and especially right now when we're not seeing anybody in person, including new patients. So my prior to COVID, I would see new patients in person at least the first time. There was still an option for people to follow up in person if they chose to. But it was fairly limited because it wasn't actually that popular. People, I had 1 day a week that I was in the office that included both new patients and in-person follow-ups. But because there isn't, this brick and mortar model where someone like comes into your practice and you onboard them in that way, the website ends up being a really important tool for capturing your target audience and your target customer. And so there's a whole bunch of features that have been built into our practice website, not just the like searchability terms that bring it up, but also especially I think the chat feature that's on there that captures people very quickly and lets them engage, remotely, like through a chat box and learn whatever they need to learn.
A good analogy, and as I'll start to move into some of the other discussion, is the more you move away from a brick and mortar, the more your website has to be that brick and mortar in its essence. So just as you want your office to be beautiful, you want your website to be beautiful. Just as you want somebody to be there to greet people as they walk into your brick and mortar, the more virtual you get, you're going to want somebody to greet the visitors to your website at various levels of what they've actually invested in you thus far. You also want to make sure that your message is correct. You want to really ensure that the true leads can convert into new patient inquiries and then those into patients. And a big thing would be transparent in pricing and terms. I know there is a lot of discussion about should you put prices out there, should you not? In my experience, eventually they are going to want to know the price. You'd rather rule them out as a patient if you're overpriced or you aren't in their model or you don't accept their insurance. You'd rather get that done right away than invest time and energy into them. My own personal take on that. Some view it differently. Why you and why them? You should be selective of who comes to you to make sure that you have the right patient. And please, a lot of video content of you. On our website, we use a modern talk system called Talk2. It's free. Most of the things that you'll see today leverage free technology and we maximize the free version until it can't give us what we want, and then we find a way to make that tool do something else. But most things that you're about to see today have a free version or very, very low cost. So we use Talk2. Talk2 is a very strong tool. It sits on top of your website. It allows you to see who's on your website, how long they've been on your website before they initiate the chat to you. I call it time to chat. You can see the number of times they visited your site, what pages they've visited your site. If you're only licensed in a few areas, you can see where are they in the world. So can they actually be your patient? This next part, Stephanie doesn't like very much, but I love it. It integrates with my phone. So even when we are out, when we're on the weekend and somebody comes to the website, I can at least initiate a conversation with them, let them know that I'm doing something with my family, but I have their information and I will get back to them at a predetermined date. That is the person that walks into your office and you say hello to. We now have a personal connection. It took me a matter of seconds, but we have a relationship now. We also have this integrated with Slack, so the whole entire team knows when people come to our website, when people do different actions, it's fully integrated with Slack.
Which we'll also talk about as an outside application.
So this is just a picture of the website. You can see in the different corners that it can look very different. And these are just 3 options of hundreds. On the left hand, we're just showing that this is called the time to chat with how long the user was there. And on the right side is shortcuts and knowledge base. So as people come to your website and ask the same questions, you can create a knowledge base so you don't have to reinvent the wheel to answer them. Using quick shortcuts, you can give them the answers to all the questions. So being able to multitask while you talk to your visitors and do other work becomes very, very easy. Unlike if you were on the phone talking to every person that you had to, which is very hard to multitask from. So it's a really good place on a website is have a clear place for your new patients to start, to become the process. You'll see we use verbiage as new patients start here. or become a patient. I forget what our verbiage is, but it's very, very simple. Um, it's also a good place, and we don't actually do this yet. I think this is super important for those that want your message, but for some reason or another, they cannot buy into your practice. Have some low-hanging fruit to allow them to be able to purchase something. And I think it's really good to have 3 to 5 things at a kind of like a little higher price, but you can get all of them for a really good deal. And that allows your message to reach people that can't, for whatever reason, join your practice. And it's a really good way to have some little residual money as well. I believe it's also important to capture who your potential new patients are before you give them access to your registration into MDHQ. This allows you to make sure that not anybody can just go to your website, register your practice, and get on your calendar. And we'll talk more about that in a bit.
In other words, there's a vetting process that already starts from the website before anyone actually connects with them, like by phone.
And throughout this process, there should be little videos of you or your team that introduce yourself, and ask questions to the patients that they should be posing to themselves before they join your practice. And you should always be given videos and information that teaches them the next step. So you can see this is our website. The top part becomes becoming a patient. And then we have 2 sections. One is new patients start here, which is a complete walkthrough of step 1 all the way until you are sitting in a virtual seat with a provider. And for those that don't want to go through that route or have already read all that information, there's new patient application. So it's very, very clear. We currently have our system set up so it fully integrates with MailChimp. We're stopping that because we were able to find for just a few dollars of development fee, we could actually bring conditional logicing inside of our WordPress. And what I mean by that is if you offer different services, so we used to offer IVs and we offer consulting medicine, or Stephanie offers consulting medicine. We want different information to go to each of those patient population. And so using conditional logicing with some of the forms and some of the systems we use, we're able to put different information in front of the patients to allow them to have just what's pertinent for them and their process moving forward. Once they've done some type of initial vetting, registration, contact form, you should take them to a welcome video of yourself, telling them the process they're getting ready to go through. It's a really good place to just have you start to be shown. Also have all the instructions in multiple ways, both video works as well as email, for them to know the steps of how to register into your practice and the best steps to be the most successful patient. I really believe the more virtual you get, you should lean more towards the 90% of that patient to be able to do everything to become a patient of yours and get on your calendar, except that last 10% is a barrier of vetting. In our practice, we allow the patients to do everything. When they join MDHQ, they get welcome messages, they get a phone call from myself, but to schedule that first patient appointment requires connection between our office manager and that new patient inquiry. After that, after you've been a patient for the first patient appointment, you've been shown and you've been taught you can go and schedule your appointment just like you normally would. But that first patient appointment allows you to really control your patient population. And like everything else, and you'll understand, this is fully integrated into Slack. So as new patients get on board, as new patients schedule, our team is being notified this in real time so they know that they have their actions to do. Because everything that happens, someone on your team probably has to do something else. Yeah. Policies and procedures, frequently asked questions, make them simple to find, make your patients acknowledge them, live by them, especially providers, and update them regularly as you evolve, your practice evolves. These are living creatures. We want to continually have our patient, not only the new patients that join know our new policies, but we want the entire patient population to know them. So yearly, bi-yearly, whenever you update a policy, send it to MDHQ, have them put a form up so you can have your patient population acknowledge the new changes you've made. Just a quick little glance at this. What this is, it shows as we have new patients on board, it's integrated with a Google Sheet. This allows us to have a spreadsheet to know who's coming on board, where they are in the process, have we connected with them, have they scheduled, did they register in MDHQ. About 90% of this is completely automated. We go in and just change colors and do a few marks. But this is a document just to watch the patient's onboarding flow and just ensure that everyone's doing their steps.
It's also a chance that if for some reason they get to that last 10% and they're getting a phone call and they don't pick up, it's a place to capture what contact was made. And so anybody who might have, reached out and tried to become a patient doesn't get left behind by not knowing what to do next if they miss the first call. So it's a way to, be reminded like, oh, this person needs to be called again, like another week later. And then if we don't connect, we abandon it, but that's what that is for. And then as soon as they become a patient and they're active in our system, that spreadsheet's no longer used.
And this was actually created for that exact policy. One new patient once slipped through the cracks, and then they contacted us, and so we designed a system so we wouldn't.
It actually gave me a bad Yelp review
because
they couldn't reach us.
Yeah, it was it's a one bad Yelp review. It's because, and so we had to create a system so it never happened again.
Yeah.
When you have, the more virtual you become, you no longer have that receptionist that they can walk into. So when you have that new patient initial phone call that welcomes them to practice, talks to them about your operations, how to be a successful patient, it really needs to be done by somebody that has drank the Kool-Aid of your practice. Somebody that really believes in the medicine you're doing. Everything I talk about with outsource, make virtual. This is something that really needs to be held center to the practice, because this is your connection to the patient. Never sell your practice. Tell the truth. If you do hard work medicine, make sure the patients joining know it's hard work medicine. If you know there are pain points that most patients will eventually feel or some feel, tell them up front. This is when it's just give them the information and spend the time it takes. Sometimes these calls are 20 minutes, sometimes they're 90 minutes, but because you don't have an office for anybody to walk into, if you don't take the time to present all of the information in an organized fashion to a patient or potential patient and listen to all of their questions, you eventually will get them. You'll get them in the written form. You'll get them through, I don't know how to do things. So if you take the time up front to ensure that that container of support is held, then it saves work down the road, and ensure they know the next steps. And then the last being the 3 roles. Explain to everyone that joins the practice the roles that everybody is held responsible to. I share everybody the administrative roles. We build the container of support. We support the doctor and the providers. We do this and this. It's the doctor's job to see you, to make your transformational wellness protocol, to ensure that she's always giving you the best medical treatment. And then it's your job as a patient too, and do the hard work, to show up when you're supposed to do your labs on time. It sounds silly, but when you have this conversation with everybody, there's never the assumption anymore of, did they know that's what they're supposed to do? And it really saves conversation and frustration for everybody down the road.
I'd rather say like it kind of sets the expectations up for how to be a successful like patient partner. And therefore also kind of clears out people that are looking for a quick fix or looking for you to, fix them, give them a pill, or, XYZ, whatever the case may be.
Unless that's the medicine you do.
Right. Which I don't think many of us do that, but.
So I will never take credit for the working procedure idea. This was when we formed the company that unfortunately imploded. This was their main offering in the idea of it. And I think it was beautiful, and we took it and we ran with it and just evolved and made it grow. But any task that is done, small to big, you have a step-by-step guide of how it's done, when it's done, why it's done. And it becomes, of all the things that Stephanie talked about earlier, for them. You turn them into a video manual, and it's just an amazing resource of information to learn how your practice actually functions. The more organized you are, the more you're allowed to use technology, because everybody's doing things in the same way.
It's very systematic, becomes very systemized. So
this is a just rough table of contents for one of the working procedure manuals I put together for a client a few years ago. And this is only the few that they wanted to implement, because remember, this is your practice, and your practice is going to do things and tasks differently than any other. So there is no one manual. It's your practice manual.
So there's a way to accept faxes. There's a way to what to do when a credit card gets declined. You know, all the different things that happen in a practice.
So you can see on the left, I created this, right, with Rava Wellness's teamwork. We created this. This is how they accepted faxes in their office, and it's every step. It includes what happens when a fax comes in and it's upside down. But part of the instructions are, if a fax comes in upside down, rotate it. On the right, this is lab instructions for if you are going to order Armin lab test kit. And so every single task, every single lab would have its own instructions because they're slightly different. And that would be the printed version. You can see our VA made some really good ones, because now once you have the written form, you can go to your staff and say, wonderful, now record yourself doing it, talking out loud. Mind you, these are all internal because of patient information. That doesn't mean that you can't have a secret password encrypted drive with this information. And you'll quickly just see, we'll play this video. Everything's blurred and it's choppy. But what it will...
Okay, hello again. So in this video, I'm gonna be teaching you how to annotate a doctor's data bacteriology profile. So again, we just have to copy the title.
So she will go on to explain just the step-by-step. And we blurred the information out, but just wanted to show that it's really simple. It's just somebody doing the task, talking out loud. She's not professional in the way she's speaking because she knows she's making this document for our staff. And it's not meant to be this polished thing, because this will change. And as your practice changes and you use different technologies and different tools, they're gonna probably continue to change. So don't spend so much time doing the video as much as having the information.
And we'll show you too that, I mean, a lot of you already know, but we use Loom to capture that kind of video content. We've already talked about this.
So we've talked about, but didn't actually mention it. If you're a provider and a business owner and you're doing a lot of the things that could be given to somebody else, you must remember that you are probably the largest revenue source of your business. So you answering questions or you opening faxes is actually a net negative in revenue. If you gave that task to somebody else and you were allowed to see one extra patient, more than likely that paid for that person for like the week. So, yeah.
So a bit about my particular virtual team. We have an office manager. So everybody except for one person on our team is based in the US. My office managers, just like any office manager, like runs the ship. She's based right outside of Chicago. We have a virtual medical assistant who's in Montana, and her job is to do, you know, simple chart check medication refills with my sign off, to deal with lab, you know, companies and lab orders, and, you know, a whole number of other things that she does. We have a virtual assistant or VA that is outside the US who does very basic back office tasks like transcribing lab notations so that it can be easily imported into the SOAP note, sending patients you know, very generic messages that their labs are back. And then we also have a physician's assistant who's mostly focused on a coaching role, who lives in Southern California.
And I want to add one more, because she is integrated with the white label store. The customer service agent is really a part of your practice. She lives in Mexico. She's not directly on your team. She's more on my team, but she interacts with the office. The office gives her tasks to do, and she does it because she is your representative in the customer service store, and she plays that part very well. So
what he's talking about is the white label online store that's similar. You know, a lot of people using FullScript or Wellevate and things like that.
We'll get to that.
And we'll talk more about it later, but essentially the customer service person for managing that.
So you definitely need to understand the laws in your state when you implement this. So in California, 1099 employees, and laws are currently changing due to AB5 and then the Senate bill to repeal it, 990. But really ensure that you are following the letter of the law to allow you to hire the 1099 contracted employee, and ensure that it's not fuzzy at all.
Yeah. In other words, like, what are the criteria that have to be met for somebody to be 1099 contract versus having to be an actual W-2 employee in your practice? And that varies by state.
So the more virtual you become, the more connected you must become. And what I mean by that, so we use Slack, and you can see Slack on the right. Slack is an instant messaging chat system that allows you to break your office up into different channels or groups. It allows you to upload documents. It integrates with many, many tools. On the left, you can see is our weekly agenda. You must meet at a minimum once a week with your virtual team, but not just because you need to meet, but because if you were in an office, you would see them every day. And so you have a running agenda, so people know what tasks they have assigned to them, so they know what's the energy of the practice, what are we talking about this week, how is everything going, and then from that you can even turn it into a more organized. These are the tasks and jobs that came from the meeting. This isn't actually from our office one. I just grabbed one from a client, but it's very similar, as in the expectations from that agenda.
In other words, it's a project management list. So if we have a team meeting and there's tasks to be carried out, everybody knows what their job is from, between the current meeting and the following week's meeting of what needs to be done in the practice.
And you can use systems like Asana or Trello. I love Trello. You can use different tools. So you don't ever have to use the tools that we're using, but just have the information in a place that people can grab it. And I'll go back real quick. You can see that all of these URLs that we get for these documents, we put inside Slack. So there's no confusion of where or how to get to the agenda, how to get to the weekly meeting, because we can put all this information for the team to use.
And another thing that's nice about that is like not having to sift through a whole bunch of emails looking for links to things. The Slack is much easier to access, and we don't use email between our team members or really at all.
Yeah,
and that's a lot easier, I think, to locate things and communicate.
The practice manager definitely needs to run the ship. I view it's your job as a business owner and a provider to hire a good team. And a good team means you hire an office manager that can run your office for you. Your job is, as a provider, is to see patients, not run a business. And that is it's the hard part for most provider owners, because that's your other baby. And you have to know that you put somebody in charge, hire somebody good, puts them in charge so they can run your business while you see patients. The communication we use, everything's based off of the EMS system, the command system. So closed loop communication.
You have to say what that is. EMS system.
Yeah. So when there's large scale fires or small medical incidents, everybody uses the same type. You use common vocabulary. So when you're talking to your team, you use verbiage they understand. When you give an instruction, you wait for somebody to actually reply to you in some acknowledgement that they received it. You also emphasize the closed loop, which means when that task is done, you expect some type of indication, message, Slack message, task sent back to you that the task was completed. For most of you business owner providers, just because you've told somebody to do it doesn't mean you've pulled it out of the Rolodex here. It's still in there with the 12,000 other things you have filed. And if somebody can come back and say, I did it, it's closed, you get to shut it down, as opposed to, I know I gave that to somebody, I'll find out next week if it was done. You'll see that we use, it's called a date stamp and text snippet. There's two main ones. We'll talk about them more in the future in this video, but you'll see what they are and how they're used. A lot of what we talk about may seem like a lot of extra communication, but once your virtual team gets really integrated with it, nothing's ever missed. It actually isn't any extra work. It's actually a lot faster. You'll learn that by stopping using email as a main form of communication, email is just not meant for quick messages. It's meant for giving a lot of information to a lot of people and not needing to reply back. So when you need to communicate with somebody, you want to use Slack or Zoom. Not so much the providers for this next one, but for the team, multiple times throughout the week, I get Slacked or I Slack someone in the team, hey, can we jump in a meeting for 5 minutes? We throw the link in there, or if you have predetermined channels, you just jump into that channel's Zoom link, you connect, you can have the dialogue because sometimes typing is not as convenient as talking, and then you jump off and you go do it. It's really, really efficient. And I've never actually met anybody on our team, but they're like family to me and they're family to Steph, and that's how they should be to you.
Met in person.
And again, nothing, this is all integrated with Slack. So everything that happens in MDHQ, we integrate it into Slack some way, because as of right now, if you're not logged into your MDHQ, there's no way to alert you that something happened.
So you're talking about that Cerbo has a messaging system.
Cerbo has a messaging system.
But there's no notification available, whereas Slack notifies you if you're on your computer, there's notification dings or whatnot. You can set it to whatever you want, but it's also nice too, because depending on how your team functions and what works for them, they can keep the app on their phone. And say they're at their kid's basketball game for 2 hours, but they, might need to do something for 2 seconds, like while they're there, they can get notified on their phone even. And that has been also a nice thing for our team, is that our primary team are all moms of multiple children, and they're amazing. And what they also love about working in this capacity is that they have all the flexibility in the world. There's not you have to be here 9 to 5. There's a work at your own pace, like be able to, duck out for a doctor's appointment or, kids sporting event or whatnot. And yet they can stay connected as they wish to be able to still be, responsive and available.
And with that, and we won't get into it here, the conversation if you currently have employees, how to convert them or change them to a different type of classification. There are multiple benefits that you can make for them as well. I won't get into it here. That's a different conversation. But just know that some of you currently have employees, and the ways you can convert them to contract, should they choose, and should you choose, you can make it so both teams win. So what you see right here on the left, this is an Excel spreadsheet of the entire database that we use for our snippet connection, or our snippet talk, and so like the date stamp, you'll see when we show some of the work inside MDHQ that everything that somebody does has a date stamp by it, and it's done by simply I type DSKM, and right there my initials come. When I type another snippet, those words come up. When I type a different snippet, different words come up. And so instead of having to re-type all of these same type of messages, you can save messages and communication that you repeatedly send to patients and have it auto-populate in a fast way.
A similar thing that all of you may be more familiar with is Cerbo has the chart parts, and when you type the first 3 letters of the chart part name, it pops up the entire thing. You don't have to retype it. You can just insert. It's the same idea with these text snippet programs. And I don't personally use the text snippet. I do use a lot of chart parts, but our whole team does use this snippet method, so they don't have to retype the same things over and over again. They can just use the first few letters. And
what she just said makes me kind of smile, because that means we're doing it correctly. So chart parts work inside MDHQ. Snippets work globally everywhere. So the fact that she doesn't need to use anything outside means we're kind of keeping her in MDHQ, and that is the goal. If she's in MDHQ, the business is always moving forward. If you're leaving MDHQ, it's at best slow down, if not breaks, as in like stopping, not it broke. We're all here because of Cerbo MDHQ.
And if you're not on it yet,
you should be.
And you want to have all these, possibilities and customizations and ability to just like run your practice as if you were opening your laptop out of a box. It's probably one of the most robust systems I've seen. It's relatively intuitive. It was specifically built for the doctor dad.
I won't get into the long story. Most EMRs come from a place of somebody wanting to start a business or wanting to leverage and change technology. The creation of MDHQ was a son wanting to create something, the best tool for his dad to use. So it was built for a doctor. If you've ever used other tools, you can feel that things just happen intuitively inside MDHQ, like they should, because of where it came from. It was birthed for providers.
Ben's dad is a doctor, if you didn't catch that. Ben, the founder.
So when your patient onboards, from the information that we got from your website to when they registered, we want to make sure the appropriate questionnaires get to those patients. So, consents, certain age groups may have different consents. IV patients versus functional medicine case review patients would have different consents. Virtual consent versus in-office consent. So set up things automatically to appear to the right patient, so you don't have to say that slipped by. Oh, we didn't get that consent from that patient. If you build the system and it happens automatically, it just always happens. MDHQ has this organically, the new patient onboarding checklist, but make sure your team actually knows how to use it or uses it in conjunction with something. Make sure there is an onboarding checklist WP, so everybody knows their roles and responsibilities when a new patient is onboarded, even if it's going to be 6 months down the road, for their first task for that new patient. Make sure that everybody knows what their role is for every new patient. Continue to hold the container of support for your patient. Every time that you have communication with a patient, make sure that there's clear direction and path for what they need to do to move forward to be a successful patient. Ensure using proper standard messaging. It's one of the reasons we really enjoy Phrase Expander and Alfred, because if everybody is saying the same thing, it doesn't mean you can't personalize the message, but if the content is the same, then it means the message is the same, which means everybody's on the same track. And then getting information. So because of the app we created, our patients get notified when they schedule an appointment right away, but also we send them a personal reminder the Friday, the week before their appointment, to make sure that they've done everything and they're on track. It's also a great way for that last check stop before you send that message to let them know their appointment. Has everything actually been collected? Are we as an office actually ready to see them? So when you're doing that ahead of time, it allows that one last person to make sure that we are going to show up prepared and be ready and as most professional. And if we are missing something, it gives us a little bit of time to say, patient, we need this, or it lets the staff know, hey, you've got 2 days to get this. So it's a really good way just to be personal to your patient, as well as that final check to make sure that you are ready to go. Patient communication. So one of the number one complaint I will say we had from patients is they wanted to communicate with us, but they don't want to send a message because they would have to log into the system. They would continue to want to use the phone. They continue to want to send email. And so we had to create the policy that said you must only message. Once you are a patient of this practice, the only form of communication that's accepted is through the patient portal. So to solve the complaint from the patients of I don't want to log in every time, we created an app. That app is actually available to anybody on MDHQ, but because it can be changed and white labeled, but it's something that the patients actually have really gone to enjoy and love, because just like anything, once you're logged into an app on your phone, you're always logged in. You can choose to log out, but if you can do it on the patient portal, you can do it in the app, other than dealing with credit card information. And our patients, about a third of our patient population is using the app on. A
bit more.
Oh, it's more now?
Yeah.
Okay, so
almost half.
Oh, it's even better. And then the surprise to me is on the app, I built it just as a little extra thing. I added Stephanie's YouTube playlist in there, and
I didn't know that.
she didn't, and that is the page that every patient is spending more time on that one section than any other part. And so that shows me that really cool. If you can continue to give new messages and put it on your playlist, your patients will see it if it's in their app. And no, that's, yeah, they spend more time on that than anything else.
Big surprise to me. So I've used the like little video recordings for all kinds of things, answering simple questions like teaching topics, you name it. But now that I know that they have it available in the app, I guess I got to get to work and make some more video content.
Patient communication is huge. MDHQ does so much right. One of the things that they didn't build was a way for us to connect with every patient right away, and in a group message in a simple form. So we built a bulk messaging email platform that will send email through MDHQ to all of your patient population. It's a really quickly.
That's too long.
It's a.
Good morning. I just wanted to quickly show.
I'll kind of like.
You go to pull up a search on the parameters for the patient.
I'll mute it. So what happens is you just pull up a quick search for the parameters that you'd want to send a list to your patients. You just copy that list. You bring it into the FxMedSupport, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The integration. You select the appropriate app. You paste their emails in there. And then you put a subject and your message and hit send. And this will go through and send one at a time to every active patient in your MDHQ profile. This doesn't send it to a listserv. So if they're not a patient of yours, the system will reject it. This is when you need to send a message to your entire patient population. Rava Wellness uses this daily. They're especially in the COVID period. And it's a way that you can message all of your patients at once through your organic system. So you don't need to use MailChimp, you don't need to use ActiveCampaign.
Nor do they have to log in to see a portal message.
No, that's an email. Like it's email.
It comes as an email.
So that's patient communication. This is staff communication. You'll see on the left-hand side, this is how a normal task looks in our office. The oldest message is at the bottom, and as it moves from person to person, you can see the continual date stamp, so we know when somebody had the message. You can see what they did and then who they sent it to. On the right, you can see that the name of the task would equal or be the same as the encounter on the right. Unfortunately, as I was going through this, I grabbed information from different patients, so it isn't the exact name because it's actually a different patient. But if somebody was to look at the task and say health coach maintenance plan, they could then go right to the patient's chart and know exactly what encounter we're talking about. Is this actually a portal question about a medication adjustment? And so you don't have to dig through a patient's chart to find what we're talking about. Every single encounter that has a task, because not every encounter needs a task, but everyone that has a task, it's just named the same. And so you can find it really easy and the information moves simple.
And then when the task is done, after it's been swapped back and forth between whoever it is that needs to be doing something, it gets closed out at the end.
When you set your system up, and this is an example of setting Cerbo's alt plan database with some customizations, and then the CPT database with customizations. So when the alt plan database is customized, and in this case, integrated with the white label store, anything that happens in your store, whether you add a new product, put a product on out of stock, your alt plan database or your supplement database is updated in real time. So hypothetically, if Megaspore Biotic went out of stock, we wouldn't continue to tell patients this is what you need to purchase because they know they can't purchase it. So it tells the office to recommend a different product or recommend it with the note, we'll let you know when it is back in stock and we will put it back in your cart or in your chart.
And the other point of all this, the databases that Cerbo has available. So these are kind of advanced features that some of you may or may not be using, but essentially it's, the customization for your practice then allows other kind of, what do you want to call automations to occur. So because my supplement recommendations are in my alt plan database, not only can those things be updated in real time, like, oh, it's out of stock or we're switching it, but when I add it to my plan, it automatically populates in their store cart, which we'll show you a bit more later as well.
Jumping ahead. On the right is the CBT database. When your database is really organized, it allows you to identify different types of labs but just by the colors that they are. When the information is actually entered complete and full, it allows you to have all the instructions on your lab requisition for the phlebotomist. So there is no question of what color tube this one marker goes with. There's no question of how it needs to be stored and who it gets sent to. So you can see it on the right-hand side. This one patient happens to have a bunch of lab orders by a bunch of different companies, and you can quickly see yellow is Armin, blue is LabCorp, different shades of green.
We would not actually ever order, blood labs from Quest and LabCorp and THD and Cleveland Heart Lab.
This is actually my chart.
This is just an example.
I was just throwing it out there.
Of showing how the color coding really helps to organize the open order, so you can take a quick glance and see, where the orders are coming from, and it just groups it for ease.
So some other changes that we've added that, unless you've worked with us prior, you probably have never seen. When you're in your encounter note and you've typed that note for your patient, and you need somebody on your staff to do their next part, usually you hit save and sign or save, and you go make a task for them, or you go tell them you now have to do something. With this little customization, you can click that button. In our office, you just one click it, it goes to one person, and it says the encounter is ready for you to work on. On the right, this happens to be Campbell Family Medicines, and they chose, they're a brick and mortar with some virtual. They have a larger team, and so the encounter isn't always going to one person. They wanted the ability to send the task to different people, multiple people. So by that provider selecting, please alert the admin and the phlebotomist and the health coach, that allows more people to jump in when it's their turn, to know that the provider's done with their part and now it's their turn to take. And that means the provider didn't have to go create anything. They just do click, save, and move on.
And then that next person in the lineup picks up their tasks.
And that task was created automatically.
Yeah.
You can see, this is kind of just a little example that when the CPT database is created correctly, and you wanted to now possibly bring in dropship lab test kits. So our practice, we hold nothing in-house. I say that with a big asterisk. Of the big test kits, we have one of everything in stock. And that's because you never know if and when, well, now it'll be never, because nobody will be in the office anymore. But if patients do come to your office, there's always that 1%. So have the ability to hand it to them if that one patient needs it. But usually patients can wait 2 to 3 days for it to show up on their doorstep. When it's set up correctly, the doctor and the admin and the staff just do their normal thing. But because the information was set up correctly, you can do a faxable form, quickly assign that lab to that patient, hit the signature button, and then hit fax, and it's done. And it's drop shipped to the patient at their house with their instructions, the lab requisitions in their file. It's on their app. When they go to the phlebotomist's office, if they didn't even have the lab requisition, it's on the phone. They can email it to them in real time. It's just fast.
And another kind of feature of this too is that I think maybe like more understandable is actual lab kits, whether it's like from Great Plains or Doctor's Data or Genova. Instead of filling out their online form or a paper form or some other, like having the test kit where you have to mark off the requisition, this actually pulls everything into Cerbo and automates the function. So it's just a few clicks, and they do not require it to be their actual form. All of these companies have been essentially like there is a relationship agreement that says this is the information they need, and they will accept the order as such. And then when it gets faxed and or emailed from the system, that's their cue to drop ship the kit to the patient directly.
It's adaptive technology. So if somebody out there if I set this up for somebody and it's a new relationship, it's some massaging. It's what information do we have to provide you so we don't have to use your form? And we've never had a company say no. It's just, it takes conversations, but as long as they have their information, usually they will agree to use this because in the end, they want your business.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that makes this system really lovely, and this is even for brick and mortar, it removes inventory of test kits that if you don't use go expired, and there's just so much. And the thing that I hated about it when we had it is, what do I do with it all? I had to go to the dump and just dump.
Yeah.
So it's just, and I'm looking at not so much of me having to go to the dump. I'm looking at the waste. I don't like wasting.
Having to throw stuff away.
Yeah. And so it's just, this is
Saves the planet.
Saves the planet, built for virtual, but yet is even more important for the brick and mortar that has the closets full of these test kits. This is just an example of, after you've given me your lab requisition, what I turn it into, and then I either through an integrated system or just email it to Cerbo, and they automatically update it into your profile. So in the end, it is just a database. And if somebody wanted to go through and do this themselves, you totally can. It's very simple, actually. It just takes a lot of time.
What he's talking about is setting up your CPT database for the labs that you use. So if you use LabCorp, everything's entered. If you use, various test kits from Genova, because this is like kind of the back end of the data set that gets uploaded into Cerbo, so that becomes a database that belongs to you.
What you're actually looking at here is ACU Labs requisition, just in a database form. Estimates. So I remember, Stephanie would tell her patients, go do this lab, go do this lab, go do this lab. And we never really knew what labs would be coming in. And so we decided to use an estimate model. And that means at the end of every appointment, the staff creates an estimate to the patient and says, based upon the doctor's recommendations, this is what she says you should do. Do you approve it? And the approve it is for two things. One, it allows the staff to do the things and drop ship the test kits automatically. But one of the most important things is you now never know, you don't know what's not going to come back in. You know exactly what the patient has chosen to move forward on.
Yeah, I can actually speak to this a little bit more too. So if you have the model where you're handing a patient a lab test kit and then they, pay the lab directly, for example, we're lucky if it's actually in your order set, so you can even know that you gave it to them to begin with. But then the other thing that was always a conundrum was like, are they going to do the test? I mean, how many patients have their test kits just sitting somewhere buried in their home and never to be done, right? In this case, providing the estimate, one says, hey, are you going to do these lab kits? Because if you are, this is the cost involved. And if you approve this, then not only are they committing to it at that time, but it also therefore ensures that they do it because they paid for it. But then you also, know that that's in your order set. And when it's time for them to follow up, if for whatever reason those lab results haven't come in, you know exactly what to find out, where their test results are. As opposed to giving somebody a kit and having it get lost in the black hole of, did you do your testing? Did you not? And then the second part of this being the estimate is that I used to have the patients pay the lab directly, but now, I don't know when we changed this, but now I actually have the patients pay the practice. And so the practice gets paid for the lab test kit. This lets me give, very competitive pricing based on our cost as opposed to a retail cost. And the charge then happens once the patient turns the test kit in and the test gets run. The lab companies, whether it's GPL or Doctor's Data or whatnot, have my account information on file with a credit card, and they will run the charge at that time. So the practice already got the revenue up front, and then we get billed on the, on the back end on the testing. The revenue for those tests then gets applied to the credit card charge. So there's not really ever a running balance because that's revenue you've already collected. But the other thing that's nice about that, which is a little bit of that lifestyle thing, is you get to accrue mileage points or travel points or cashback points or, any number of perks because you're using a business credit card very regularly. And that's just a nice little perk and benefit. It's a win-win. The patient, gets the price different, the price break. You get to know that they're going to do it, and you get to have that charge run through, a mileage card, for example, when we get to fly again.
Yeah. So applications, platforms, and integrations. The first thing you need to do whenever you're going to decide to go the route of bringing everything together is you need to get an audit of everything you have. I imagine if your companies are very similar to how Steph's was in the very beginning, is you have a lot of little one-off subscriptions, $1.99, $5.99, $10.99, $25. When you look at them, they add up to big money. So you want to start removing, identify and remove the redundancies, identify what you actually don't need anymore. How can you take it from a high paid plan to a low paid plan? What are you paying for that you can actually get for free? Because every day somebody's developing a new technology, and they'd like the way they get users is give 90% of their service for free. And so if you're on a paid platform, is there a free platform that does it?
Yes.
And then if nothing is there, spend the little extra money to build the tool you want, because then it solves a need and it's a low investment.
Yeah, so I think like an example of this is MailChimp. The number of people I have in my MailChimp database is such that it charges me $60 a month to use their service. And being able to now have the bulk emailer, which was a very quite low upfront cost and not much of a residual cost, has cut down that $60 a month fee by a lot. Same thing goes for text platforms that you might use as a one-off, or I'm trying to think of other.
Well, to talk about, we'll definitely talk about the text platform in relation to the app, but exactly. And now we're actually getting ready to cancel MailChimp completely because we just built a new tool that no longer does the conditional logicing email for the new patient onboarding. We are now build it inside of our system. So it's always about, instead of paying $60 a month, that's forever. That's $600 a year. Can we spend $300, develop the tool we need, and never have to pay anybody again?
Or $720. Sorry.
The main communication tools we use, Zoom. We're on it right now. Thanks to the environment, Zoom is the #1 company in the world right now. Communication company. Slack is the texting communication platform we use. Loom is the technology that with one click you can record your screen. You can record you talking. It's what we use to create the WPs. A lot of times, if you just need to tell somebody how to do something, it's easier to show them how to do it than just tell them. So, we'll send Looms back and forth on Slack, or we'll watch the Loom in Zoom. And so they just really all work together. And then the snippet tools being Alfred and FxMedSupport. We all know what Zoom looks like.
Yeah.
Slack, we've kind of gone over it. The key is that we use it in our office is integrate. So anything that happens outside, since this is where we talk, we want information to populate automatically here. So you can't really see it, but if we got a new patient inquiry, if we got, if different things happen in our system, they pop up here. So this is
the first little blue box that says MPI registration. So it'll show up in that channel when somebody has actually registered to become a patient.
And you can control what information gets populated. This is Loom. It's Loom.
I know one of my colleagues uses it to do lab reviews for each of her patients, and then she has a password protected video that she sends so they can review their labs before their appointment. That's one of the ways she uses it.
I'd love to connect with her so we can integrate it automatically. This is Alfred and FxMedSupport, just what they kind of look like. Now, the other two technologies that we use are Nutriment, which is the white label supplement store. It's
basically customized full script. So instead of it being full script that patients go to, it's functional medicine SF store. It's Rubber Wellness store. And
then FxMedSupport, and you'll quickly see. So the integration with the white label Nutriment store is we've already updated your alt plan database to be exactly what you want to prescribe your patients. You're not locked into Emerson, FullScript. You're not locked into their supplement database because you're a provider. You can open accounts anywhere you want, and so we bring your products into your store and into your EMR. And the way we set this up is so you can just work the way you normally work, no extra work. And your patients' accounts get created when their account is created inside of inside of Cerbo. You can see, is it playing? So what the video will quickly show you is on the right-hand side of the red box you'll quickly see the icon is about to get pressed. On the right-hand side is your patient's compliance. So those are the supplements that they've actually purchased from you. On the left is that patient's cart. As you're a provider, and the video will show you, when you go to your encounter and you wanted to recommend an item to your patient, it's as simple as adding it. It'd be better if you had chart parts. So if you're working on a mold protocol and you hit enter, the supplements automatically get added to your plan box. And then you'll see when we quickly go to the next screen that just by you doing your normal recommendation and job, we'll hit the refresh button. Those items automatically get added to your patient's cart.
So you can see on the left where it says current cart items because he just added them, versus the right column that says these are the things that the patient has already purchased in the past.
But just like adding them, sometimes we need the ability to remove it. And so if you decide, oh my gosh, we don't need digestive enzyme 32, I wanted green tea for that patient, you just simply remove it and it will update in real time. The thing that is also important is based upon your timeline. So functional medicine SF uses 24 hours. Modern Thyroid Clinic uses 12. Based on the last time that encounter was touched, your patient would then get an email from your store. So shop.functionalmedicinesf is Stephanie's store. Shop.modern-thyroid is Modern Thyroid store. Then they get an email that says your wellness plan has been updated. Click here to go to your cart and check out. And your patients are provided a one-click link, and it takes them right to the supplements that you recommended and allows them an ease to check out.
And then in my practice, I give them the opportunity if they need to change the number of bottles of something they get, if they need to swap something out, they have the ability to do that within the store. But you can set those parameters however you want and control any number of products as much as you want or not. And one other thing I wanted to mention, because in this video demonstration, it showed Kevin adding the supplements to the order. In my practice, all I do is actually just have them in my recommendations as I'm typing in the SOAP note, so in the plan. And when the team processes that encounter, they actually add it to the plan box. I don't have to do that, but sometimes there are those suggested actions, so they just have to actually just click them into the plan box, because if I used a chart part for, say, magnesium citrate, there's that part of the chart part where you can add the alt plan option and actually add the supplement there. And when you write your magnesium chart part, it will give the suggested plan. And then in my case, the team just adds them. And it's when it gets added to the order or plan box that it ends up in the cart.
What we're seeing right here, there is a video. We won't watch the video because it's long, but this is another feature that pops up. This is called the eye chart, or the ingredient chart. This was the brainchild of Natalie and Heather, who are on this call. What this does is, after you've recommended everything to your patient, you have the ability to log in on the back end and see all of the items that are in your patient's cart, and it aggregates all the liked ingredients. So if you have 8 different supplements and they all have vitamin A, it'll give you a total vitamin A. You can make sure you're never overdosing or underdosing the patient. But more importantly, a problem that we wanted to solve is patients don't like taking 8 different supplements. So at the end, you can actually just go across and highlight all of the ingredients, the total ingredients, and build a custom supplement for them. So maybe they take just 1 supplement and just swallow 3 pills a day instead of 8 supplements and 16 pills. Yeah. It's a really, really good tool.
And the customized supplement vendor that we use is called Personalized Nutrients. So if anybody's curious about that, I can share.
The other thing that we have integrated is, if you use the wellness plan, we take the supplement information out of the wellness plan and we populate that into your patient's account. So when they log in, they can see not only the supplements that you have recommended, but how you want them to take it. And then this actually prints on the invoice for them if they were to actually print it, but it'll be in their email. So not only do they have your wellness plan that you provided them in MDHQ, they now have the instructions that you want them to take how to take it. And it's personal to them, updates in real time. So if you were to go in and update their wellness plan real quick, the information in your store, in your patient's account, gets updated in real time. Yeah. And we don't need to watch the video because that's what I just told you it does. The communication platform we use to monitor the stores and control, or not control, but just connect with everybody is Talk2, something we already talked about earlier. Since these are your stores, you set the price, you set the policy, you set what your desired profit margin would be. We take a per order, per vendor, per order inventory of everything we get charged, so we know on every single order what our profit margin is, to make sure that the store is actually being profitable, to make sure the patients are getting the discount they should. And this is just a way to ensure that we're pricing accordingly. And every now and then, like you'll see on line 104, we obviously had something priced wrong because we had lost 10%. But we only lost 10% once because we went in and you can see that the price was updated. And it's usually updated to be about recommended pricing from retail. And then we usually add about 75 cents. And that helps us for the next price increase.
Well, except for then also in my store, I have an automated discount that then also gets applied. So the patient gets the discount. And the other thing that's an advantage of this is, things like Wellevate or FullScript give you a commission. There's more commission available if you have your own store and are kind of purchasing direct, and that both gives you not just the commission if you want to earn it, but then leaves even that much more percentage available if you want to give your patients a discount.
Yeah, very, very good said. And then this is just one of the reporting tools we use. This is one of the stores, just reporting tools, allows them to go in and see how they're doing. And they happen to give their patients a 15% discount, and they're still at a 34% profit margin.
Almost 35.
And the thing that makes it really good on the patients is one place to get everything. There is no more multiple shipping charges. So when your patients actually look at what they're spending overall, a supplement may be a little bit more expensive on your private platform, but that's because one order could have, you could be paying 5 different companies to ship all those. So we have to remember that you're covering all these shipping charges. So we want to remind the patient that in the end, you are saving a lot of money. There's been multiple times that patients have come back to Stephanie and say, I find that product cheaper on Amazon. And Stephanie will take the time to actually put all of their supplements as if they were to purchase them on Amazon or purchase them through us. And I don't think we've ever lost.
No,
I think we're always less expensive.
Never mind that, Amazon has its own quality issues, but that aside, if you even just want to go based on numbers. And then the other point too, with the whole different vendor thing. So Zymogen, Beyond Balance, Megaspore, everything that Emerson or Natural Partners carries, for example, like those are all options. Whereas if you wanted to, use all of those separately, you'd have to have each of those vendors be visited and each of those shipping costs.
And if you order supplements for patients, that means you're going into all of those platforms. But you can use
staff time.
You can use super small ones. Like for a little while, there was Green Dragon, and so see, there's a lot of different options with this. And then there's FxMedSupport. FxMedSupport is the technology platform that was created to push everything forward and steal more of her time back.
Or in this case, your time, if you decide that you want to automate and create efficiencies in the same way.
And this is my company. We have a mobile application that mirrors the patient portal. We do cloud linking. I'll show you a video real quick of the Zoom integration and the price point of what makes it, in my opinion, just a no-brainer for a practice using Zoom. Practice consultant, web design, and then we've talked about the integrated supplement store. These are just some of the applications that not only we connect into, but that we've created, and we are always continually looking to create more and more tools, integrations, and applications that allow you to spend less time doing something that a computer to do. And so the video we're getting ready to watch and
the efficiency.
Well, actually, I'll say. So what's about to happen is the patient has already been selected. I'm going to go ahead and select an appropriate appointment type. We use a search for 3 key variables: Zoom, video, or virtual, as long as one of those is in the appointment type. Right now, MDHQ is talking to my system. My system just opened up your Zoom account, is creating your appointment based on the parameters of that appointment, and then it will auto post the Zoom link. Oh, there you go. So that is the unique Zoom link for that patient for that appointment. And then what's happening right now is based on the template that Dr. Daniel uses in her office, the patient will receive a custom email that is sent through MDHQ with that Zoom link as well. So nobody in the office had to do anything other than schedule an appointment.
So in other words, what he's showing you is that instead of this having somebody on your team having to create all the information when a Zoom appointment's requested, it's the computer doing it. And this is just one example of an automation that kind of globally, the bigger message is that the more of these things you have built in, the less staff time and team time that takes, the more the lower that your overhead is, the more, the less likely it is that there's mistakes made or things missed. And it lets your operation function in a very lean capacity, which is also, good as a business owner, not to have a huge overhead.
So
people are expensive.
It's almost like she knew what slide was coming. So we thought, okay, on a weekly, 20 virtual appointments a week, you pay. It takes maybe 5 minutes to create a Zoom link, which when you think about it by itself, not a big deal. But when you look at that, that turns into 100 minutes a week. That turns into, turns $20 a week, $80 a month. You extrapolate that 50 weeks, that's $1,000 a year that you're paying somebody to do nothing except create a Zoom link. And if you are a provider's office that has more than one provider, you just keep extrapolating that. And that is to just do one Zoom, one task. And so when you start thinking about tasks outside of Cerbo, you have to start thinking about them as very expensive, because in my opinion, that's a lot of money to pay just to have somebody create a Zoom link. This is a commercial. The commercial, we won't watch it again. Just wanted to show you a little bigger what it looks like. The menu on the right side. This presentation we're going to post so everybody can have it. Should you want to watch this video, this is the guide that we've made for our patients. So our patients can, just like we've talked about, we want them to be successful with it. So every aspect of the app is explained to them so they can use it to be the most successful patient they can be. It's just a 10-minute walkthrough of the video. We won't watch this video, but this is another little thing that we created. It had a bug, and we just finished fixing the bug 2 days ago, I think it was. If somebody makes an appointment in your office, most likely you're going to have an encounter note created because they're going to do something. So what this does is when we've matched the associated appointment types, it will automatically create that encounter. It'll automatically create it with a predetermined title. It'll date it the correct date. It'll put the correct note categorization on there. But more importantly, if that appointment gets canceled and you delete that appointment, the encounter will delete. If you change it, the date or time, the encounter actually adjusts to that appointment.
So in other words, the computer is setting up your SOAP note for you before the appointment happens, as it's being requested. And then that's, again, somebody from your team that doesn't have to open your chart and prep the note for you. I mean, they might prep some of the other info, but the skeleton of that whole thing is already ready to go.
And then a little bit about me. I love my chickens. I love to be in the garden, but a lot of my come as a firefighter to paramedic background, and I take the same type of passion of helping people and have just changed it into a different ecosystem. I thrive in situations that most people would walk away from. I kind of get excited when the world's collapsing, and I look at needs and I find problems before we've established that there's a problem there. So
so that a solution.
Exactly. If you can solve problems with solutions before you know it's a problem, you're always one step ahead of the game. Thank you so much for watching thus far. And if there's any questions.
Yeah. There weren't any in the chat, so feel free to either unmute yourself or add them to the chat if there are any, and then we can review them if there are any.
Anyone still here?
Any questions? Yeah. Yep.
So definitely, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself, and would love to answer. And if there's
Okay.
no,
Dr. Campbell has a question.
Can you all please talk about your phone system and your only partial phone hours?
yes. So for those that are running a brick and mortar or a hybrid model, you most likely have a phone sitting next to your receptionist or a phone sitting next to somebody. When that person picks up that phone, that person is taken out of commission. They cannot do anything other than talk on the phone. And so one of the things we definitely need to strive on is, because we're on MDHQ, everybody in this room, or you're thinking about it on Cerbo, you have a patient platform system. You should be driving communication there. If your patient calls you and you answer the phone and talk to them, if you are charting appropriately, that phone call in some information needs to enter your system, because most likely it called you for a reason. And now you have to chart. If the message organically starts in Cerbo, it's already there.
Yeah, I think another point though too is that I used to have open phone hours when I first started. So somebody would call the practice and somebody would answer, and then who knows how long that would take. So a couple things would happen. One is that person that was helping me and supporting me was always on the phone. If they were on the phone, nobody else could get through.
They weren't doing anything else.
They weren't able to do anything else. And that gets very expensive. Never mind the cases where then there's also like perpetual game of phone tag, right? Somebody calls, they can't get through because they're already on the other line, or, you know, goodness forbid, that person who is your support staff has to do something else to help you and support you. And then it just becomes this back and forth. And then, as Kevin mentioned too, certain things, if they're established patients, a lot of times that communication has to end up in a chart somewhere, so that if it's not that one person who was in connection with them picking something up to do something else with the chart, it needs to be documented. So that's a whole nother step that gets avoided. So what we did was we created minimal live phone hours, which were determined by the staff themselves. They decided when they wanted to have that.
Because they're contracted employees. And so they said, this is when we want to answer the phone. It's going to sound scary when she tells you when our phone hours are.
So it's literally 3 days a week, I think.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 12:30. 10:30 to 12.
I think it's 10:30 to 12. They just changed
10:30
it.
to 12. So the reason for that is a couple things. Established patients are not supposed to call. We have trained them to communicate through Cerbo's patient portal. So that is great. If somebody needs a phone call, that can always be set up, but that's that's not often.
And real quick, those that also are communicating with a texting platform, so very similar to the phone, they now use the app. It's just as simple as texting.
Right, meaning that they can send a message through the app. The other thing is that then the phone hours end up just needing to be utilized by, like, if a lab or a pharmacy calls, the messages are checked at like very specific points in the day. So if there is something like more kind of real time in that day, like a pharmacy calls for clarification, that gets handled. But it really cuts down on that needing to be on the phone all the time, and the like dramatic expense of having someone needing to man the phones constantly.
And you use the word expense. So
Yeah.
the way that you make
not
it,
efficient.
the way that you make it work is you put your expense into a big whiteboard and you map out what your phone tree looks like. Because remember, you're not going to be there to answer a phone anymore. That doesn't mean people aren't going to call you. Your phone's going to ring just as much as it usually did until you train your patients. So what you do is you build the most dynamic, thorough phone tree, thinking about everybody that calls you. If you're calling from a lab, if you're calling from a pharmacy, if you're like, you give them the instructions, press 1, press 6, press 12, like maybe not 12, that's a tough number to press. But you give them all of the information and you think about every possibility of the people that can call you, and they go through a phone tree just like you're used to going through. And it sometimes, if you actually do it correctly, there is one that will get you to a live person. Very, very specific type of person can actually talk to somebody. But the average person, they end up leaving a voicemail. It then gets sent to the administrative task. They know, oh, this mailbox got a voicemail. We know at least the category it's from. So if it's from a pharmacist, we probably should check that voicemail right now, because it's probably a patient that needs something, as opposed to, oh, it's a solicitor. Like, we don't really need that one right now.
Or an established patient who now is so used to using the messaging system, and we give them turnaround times. Like, they now know when they're going to be in contact. There's no back and forth. There's no phone tag. And it's actually worked really well. People like a lot, people even will say how much they love how efficient it is and how reliable it is, that they know that they'll be responded to.
And we've even trained them to, if something's going on, especially in an active protocol where you need to talk to somebody, send the message saying, we need to talk to somebody. That way the staff can say, lovely, the PA will call you today in 30 minutes. Does that work? And we've eliminated that phone call back and forth, because how many times do you call somebody and that just called you, now you have to call them back and they were on the other line or they didn't answer. And so it really...
And then just in terms of the actual platform, I started with Google Voice in the very, very long ago days, and then switched to 8x8.
8x8, then
8x8, then Ring Central after that. And each one of those platforms along the way had various issues or limitations to capabilities. And then more recently, we actually switched to Zoom, which has a phone, a voice over IP phone. Because we already use it for video conferencing, it minimizes yet another platform that needs to be used. So we have one platform that does video and does phone.
And usually when you go up in a service, so Zoom was one cost. When they added their phone, it was just $10 per user,
right,
where having an entire other system
is more expensive. Yeah. And
do you have do you use Zoom through your cell phones, or do you use Zoom through a hardwired phone?
Everything is through and the app. So your phone, the computer.
The computer, yeah, phone or computer. So even for myself, if I have a patient that requested a phone instead of a video, I will use the Zoom application on my laptop to call them with my headset and or my cell phone.
And then, yeah.
And I was also going to just mention, like with the patient portal questions, because I know a lot of you may be in this boat where at the moment there's no real triage system, and so you're the one that's getting bombarded by a million questions a day. We have a system where the team is in charge of triaging them, and there are portal question parameters, so patients know anything logistical or where they need some sort of clarification for something. Most of the time the staff can handle that directly. Those are very welcome questions. If something comes clinically and it's simple, it will get well, there's a number of different ways that we handle it, but if it's there's parameters where they can't just write you a whole book and then you respond, like that we did away with a long time ago.
And or it's got to be the right type of message to eventually get to the provider,
right?
Because the lower rungs or the lower branches on the tree should always take the message and give it to the next one when it's above them, and eventually it reaches the provider if it should reach
if it's
you.
relevant.
But if you have a PA or a health coach or a nurse and they can answer that question, well, that's
who it gets delegated to. That's the triaging system. And so really, me personally, there's very few patient questions that I end up with in my task list. And I don't get to go in the patient portal question area because that's not my domain, and I can trust my team to be responsive and triaging appropriately.
And saying very truthfully honest, it was one of the very hard things for her to pull out. But that goes to the strong office manager that can continue to say, stop it. And it's not like it happened right away. It was first like, okay, you can go in there and read them, but you're not allowed to mark anything. You can't answer, you can't assign it, you can just read them. And then when she was able to see that, yeah, she's taught the staff well, the staff's doing what she wants, then she no longer really needs to do it because she knows it's handling it. And if something ends up in her inbox, it's supposed to be to her.
And it really cuts down on a huge time suck that I know a lot of you deal with, as I did.
And then, time suck and anxiety. So there are a lot of little things that happen inside of a practice that, quote unquote, I don't want to say aren't good, but are the things that make a business run. And so when your staff can just handle those small problems and it never get to you, so where you don't even know it happened, but that patient is happy, the patient was held, that's the real win, because then you're still in the ignorance is bliss la la land. A problem or an occurrence happened, and I don't say problem, but just anything.
It's a mishap. Somebody ends up at a lab and they don't have their lab slip with them, or whatever the case may be. I never hear about it.
Where she would
takes care of it.
Where she would have read the message, because of the care, because you're a provider, you're like, oh my gosh, the patient, and now you've got a level of anxiety. Well, if the staff took care of it and happened it, and you never knew about it, you never went to that fight or flight that limbic system
that we all know about.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Great question, Ellie.
Your email template that you use, or the email system right now, we use Constant Contact because we like all the, little, yeah, and the things we can reports, but also all the little graphics that we can add to make everything pretty, because that's what our patients expect.
Mhm.
So how do we do that within the system that you just taught us about?
So you can't, but for two different reasons. So the way I view it, and yeah, really good question. The way I view it is they are two different platforms for two different reasons. One, the email that you'd send through MDHQ is a text-based, because we're all familiar that the Encounter only does, regular text. You can't do bold or colors. We're all familiar with that. We're waiting for MDHQ to update it. It's a very large and difficult process to actually do on their end. So it will eventually happen, but in due time. But so we're sending, they're for quick information handouts or updates to all your patients. They are not beautiful newsletters. So if you wanted a newsletter, like a monthly newsletter, definitely an active campaign newsletter, a MailChimp would probably be where most practices would go. I really like staying inside Cerbo, and because it comes from Cerbo, it's always the level of authenticity, but also, so one is more of the update.
I wonder if there would be an opportunity where you send the email and there's actually a link to the newsletter, and the newsletter lives on, as a PDF and a URL. So that would be another option.
That's actually, so, and because you can't send images and you can't send a lot of,
at least not yet,
a lot of things yet through MDHQ, that's what we've had to do is adapt. So if we send a newsletter out and we want them to see an image or want them to see a graphic or a movie, you can put the link in there and then they can click on that link. So you could quickly, to do what Stephanie said, you could almost create a beautiful newsletter, put it on a post on your website, and then do a quick email in Cerbo, link to that page, and you can get anyone that wants to actually read the newsletter. And for us, that would be a way to remove the active campaign price tag. In my opinion, MailChimp is too expensive, so we don't even want to talk about active campaign being too expensive. I am always looking to see, in the end, are those images worth the price point? To have it be beautiful and somebody else to send it, is it really worth that price point? Or can we make a quick post on our website, have that URL, send it in a different format, and eliminate, a few $1,000s a year in operational costs? I think one of the things that Stephanie didn't get into this time, because we kind of went a little bit faster, is the more virtual we become, the more operations that get integrated and become efficient, her overall overhead is year after year dropping as revenue is increasing.
Yeah.
And so, and it's with
a good equation as a business owner.
Yeah, and I contributed to being dyslexic, and makes my brain work differently than most. And I've had to think, differently in my entire life. And so I view it, how can I do something to get the end product to be just as quality or just the same content to the patient in the lowest overhead cost possible? A good question.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I just put, just because one of you maybe were inquiring just a way if you wanted to reach, us for guidance on your own practice or even just a conversation. You can see that in the chat. Yes. What else?
Just shout.
What was it on?
What's that?
Welcome back, Cotter. Ooh, ooh. I wanted to ask about, so using this app and having virtual time text, how do you avoid the after hours expectation that patients are going to get 24/7 response time?
You just tell them up front what your hours are.
Yeah.
So how do you, I guess.
Talk about the text.
We still do primary care, so we still have urgent needs as opposed to a consultative practice. So how do you
So what's the current?
Text responses are AI and some of them are real. So I guess I'm trying to.
So So knowing that no two practices are ever alike. So one of the first thing I do when I consult with somebody is I go in and say, the goal isn't to make your practice this practice. The goal is to make your practice more efficient.
And what you need.
And what you need specifically. So knowing that you do primary care consultation, or not consultation, concierge medicine, there's levels of expectations and there are needs that are different than Dr. Daniel's root cause disease reversal type patient model. What I think you would do is because it'd be my advice for everybody, be very clear and transparent to what your messaging hours are and to the level of severity of warranting a reply. So, if somebody sends you a message and it's, I've got a runny nose, maybe you have a little thing that says like runny noses are in the green category and those will be, somebody will get back to you in like 12 hours, but if somebody also has a broken leg and they actually need to see you, probably go to urgent care. It might be a little bit better, but so the more clear you are with and transparent you are with what lane they stay in and how your messaging works, patients comply very soon. And
I think it also just depends, like, what do you currently use, right? What's the current parameter? If there is an urgent after hours, do you have an answering service? Do you have a emergency number? I think my experience from hearing from other clinicians is that when they have that availability, as long as patients know you really only use this if it's really necessary, they're generally very respectful, right? Versus a low acuity or low urgent need where they could send the message, but you tell them up front, like, our turnaround time for messaging is X number of, hours. In my practice, because I'm not primary care, it's all consultative. So they have a turnaround time that's more extended. I think it's 24.
Well, I understand how we're doing it now.
Mm-hmm. So
you have, patients have my personal cell phone number, and you're right, they're exceedingly respectful. But if we're going to shift the model to one that's 99% of the communication should go through the portal,
right,
trying to figure out how that works.
Right. So, so I think it's kind of what you're trying to say is, how would somebody be able, is there a way to be alerted if something comes into the portal that would be the same urgency as if they had texted you, is what I'm hearing you ask.
Yeah.
Is there a way to solve that problem? Right?
Yeah, so I don't know.
Can probably brainstorm it though.
We can brainstorm it. I know that we can connect everything in MDHQ, most of the things, to Slack. I don't know. It's a good question. I think short of you always having your MDHQ open, which is not the idea here.
What you're trying to find out is there another way besides a text to your personal cell phone that you could be alerted for the appropriate people who have that urgent need? So that, I think, is the problem to solve, and I think that's something that we could definitely brainstorm through.
Yeah. I'm thinking we just maybe we have MDHQ adds, buttons, urgencies of the message,
and that somehow that links to something that does alert.
Low, medium, or high. If somebody did a high,
then it would ping something or someone, and then they would be able to see it. And if it really was, that would set up a whole workflow process, a working procedure of what happens when that happens.
Yeah.
Right?
There's always a way to get what you want. It just takes brainstorming, and sometimes a few tests. Sometimes the first thing you try fails miserably, and you pick it up and adjust it. But it's a really good question. Yeah. No, thanks for that.
No, I mean, it's a good problem to solve.
My brain's not going to stop until I figure it out.
Yeah. There is an answer. We just don't know what it is yet because it's a new use case.
Oh. All right, I didn't know I was sharing my screen still.
More? Yes? Wait. Is that I love you? We love you too.
I see there's 8 things in chat. I assume you've got them all?
Yeah.
Well, lovely.
We're good.
I am always available in the Cerbo group should anybody have any questions. And thank you all so much for joining. I hope you found it to be worthwhile and good information.
Yes, we did. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming. Thank you. You're welcome.
Doggies.
Have a good weekend.